The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched so far that its ceiling disappeared into shadows. Ambassador Yuki stood at the center podium, her blue skin pale with fear. Her hands shook as she gripped the speaking stone. Around her, representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in silent rows. Their faces showed the same emotion that filled Yuki's heart: terror. "Honored council members," Yuki began, her voice barely above a whisper. The translation devices made her words clear to every species present. "The Vorthak Empire has taken another world. Ketra Prime fell 3 days ago." A wave of shocked gasps filled the chamber. Ketra Prime was home to 12 billion souls. Now it was gone, like so many others before it. Yuki continued, fighting back tears. "They came without warning. Their ships blocked out our sun. We tried to surrender, but they do not accept surrender. They do not want prisoners. They want everything we are, everything we have ever been." Captain Do-Yun sat in the observer section reserved for newer species. His dark eyes watched Yuki carefully. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Most council members still saw them as children playing with toys too dangerous for them. But Do-Hyun had studied the reports about the Vorthak. He knew what they did to the worlds they conquered. "The Vorthak do not just kill," Yuki said, her voice growing stronger with anger. "They consume. They eat our children first, while we watch. They say it breaks our will to fight. Then they take our bodies, our homes, our history. They turn our own people into their slaves and soldiers." Elder Korath of the Zentari leaned forward in his floating chair, his ancient voice carried across the chamber. "We have tried everything, young Yuki. Our fleets are stronger than theirs, but they fight like madmen. They care nothing for their own lives. How do you fight an enemy that welcomes death?" "Our economic sanctions have failed," added Councillor Vrex of the Trade Federation. "The Vorthak take what they need from conquered worlds. They do not trade, they only take." Yuki's voice cracked as she spoke again. 12 species have already fallen to them completely. 12 entire civilizations wiped from existence. The Harani, who gave us music. The Telfi, who taught us to heal minds as well as bodies. The Korvani, who showed us how to grow food on dead worlds. All gone. All devoured by the Vorthak hunger. Captain, Do-Yun remembered reading about the Harani. Their songs could make even humans cry, though they came from beings that looked like walking trees. The Telfi had helped cure mental illness across dozens of worlds. The Korvani had ended famine on 100 planets. Now there was nothing left of them but empty spaces and Vorthak feeding grounds. "We have formed the greatest alliance in galactic history," said Prime Minister Koltak of the Defensive Consortium. 67 species stand together against this threat. Our combined fleets number in the millions of ships." "And yet we lose every battle," Yuki replied, her voice bitter. "Every single one. The Vorthak adapt to our tactics. They learn from our mistakes faster than we can make new plans. They breed their soldiers in vast hives, replacing losses in weeks. When we destroy one fleet, 2 more take its place." Elder Korath spoke again, his voice heavy with age and sorrow. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation. Move our populations to the far rim of the galaxy. Hide until they have consumed the core worlds and moved on." "To where?" Yuki demanded. "They follow us everywhere. They tracked the Harani refugees across 3 galaxies before finishing them off. There is nowhere to run that they will not follow." Silence fell over the great chamber. The weight of defeat pressed down on everyone present. Some species had already begun secret evacuation plans. Others had started building hidden colonies in deep space. But they all knew the truth. The Vorthak would find them eventually. "Captain." Do-Yun stood up slowly. The movement caught Yuki's attention. She looked at him with curious eyes. Most humans stayed quiet during council sessions. They were still learning galactic politics and customs. "Permission to speak," Do-hyun said in his calm, measured voice. Elder Korath looked surprised. "You are an observer, Captain. Your species does not have voting rights in this matter." "I am not asking to vote," Do-hyun replied. "I am asking to speak." Yuki looked around the chamber. She was desperate enough to listen to anyone. "I grant you permission, Captain Do-hyun." The human stepped forward. He was smaller than most species present, but something in his dark eyes made others pay attention. "Ambassador Yuki, you said the Vorthak eat children first to break the will of parents." "Yes," Yuki whispered. "You said they turn conquered peoples into slaves and soldiers." "Yes. You said they do not accept surrender." "They do not." Do-hyun nodded slowly. Around the chamber, alien eyes watched him with growing interest. What was this small human thinking? "On my world," Do-hyun said, "we have a saying: when someone hurts children, when they enslave the innocent, when they refuse mercy, we say they have chosen their fate." Elder Korath made a dismissive sound. "Pretty words, young human. But what can your tiny fleets do against an enemy that has defeated our greatest armadas?" Do-hyun turned to face the elder directly. "You keep fighting them like civilized beings. You follow rules of war that they ignore. You try to limit casualties and preserve infrastructure. You fight with honor against an enemy that knows no honor." "And what would you suggest?" asked Counselor Vrex. The human's smile was cold and sharp. "You want to know what humans would do against the Vorthak?" "Enlighten us," said Elder Korath with obvious sarcasm. Do-hyun looked back at Yuki. The alien woman stared at him with desperate hope in her eyes. "We would hunt them down, every last one. We would follow them to the edge of existence itself. We would turn their own tactics against them, but do it better. We would teach them what happens when someone threatens children." The chamber erupted in nervous laughter from some species, shocked gasps from others. Elder Korath shook his ancient head. "Your species barely has 100 ships that can travel between stars. The Vorthak Empire spans thousands of systems." "Size is not everything," Do-hyun replied calmly. Yuki stepped closer to the human captain. "Are you offering to help us?" Do-hyun looked around the great chamber at all the powerful species that had tried and failed to stop the Vorthak threat. Then he looked back at Yuki, at the desperation and fear in her eyes. "What do you need us to do?" he asked simply. The silence that followed was different from before. This was not the silence of defeat. This was the silence of surprise, of possibility, of hope being born in the darkest hour. Elder Korath recovered first. "Captain Do-hyun, we appreciate your spirit, but this is beyond your species' capabilities. The Vorthak are not pirates or raiders. They are an existential threat to all sentient life." "I understand," Do-hyun said. His voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You have tried diplomacy. You have tried sanctions. You have tried honorable warfare. All have failed." He paused, looking directly at Yuki. "But you have not tried human warfare." Yuki felt something stir in her chest. For the first time in months, it was not fear. "What are you saying, Captain?" Do-hyun's smile was gentle when he looked at her, but his words carried the weight of absolute promise. "We will come." The emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council took place in a bunker deep beneath Geneva. Admiral Minho stood at the head of the curved table, his weathered face lit by holographic displays showing star charts and fleet positions. Around him sat the most powerful military leaders on Earth. "Captain Do-hyun made an unauthorized promise," Admiral Minho said, his voice cutting through the tense air. "He told the Galactic Council that humanity would help them fight the Vorthak Empire." General Hyok leaned back in his chair. "The same Vorthak that just wiped out 12 alien civilizations? The ones with thousands of ships and billions of soldiers? The same ones, confirmed Intelligence Director Jiwon. She touched her tablet, and new images appeared in the air above the table. These are the latest reports from the war zone. The Vorthak don't just conquer worlds. They strip them completely. Every resource, every life form, every piece of useful material gets consumed or converted. Dr. Sora, head of the Xenobiology Division, stood up. Her small frame seemed fragile next to the military officers, but her voice was steady. I have been studying Vorthak physiology from the samples the refugees provided. They are born to consume. Their entire biology is designed around breaking down and absorbing other life forms. She touched her own control pad. The hologram changed to show a detailed image of a Vorthak soldier. The creature looked like a nightmare made real. It stood, 12 feet tall on 4 legs. Its torso was covered in armor that seemed to be grown rather than made. Most terrifying were its feeding appendages, long tubes that could drain the life from other beings. They reproduce by consuming sentient species, Dr. Sora continued. Each Vorthak can create dozens of offspring by feeding on intelligent life. The more advanced the prey, the stronger their children become. Fleet Admiral Inseo studied the images with cold professional interest. What about their ships and weapons? Biomechanical, Dr. Sora replied. Their ships are grown, not built. They self-repair and adapt to new threats. Traditional weapons are only partly effective because the ships learn to resist them. President Yoonji had been quiet throughout the briefing. Now she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of her office. The Galactic Council has dismissed our offer of help. They see us as primitive newcomers who do not understand the scale of this threat. Maybe that is exactly why we can succeed where they have failed, said Admiral Minho. Commander Junho, the youngest officer at the table, looked puzzled. Sir, with respect, how can we fight an enemy that has defeated civilizations millions of years older than ours? Admiral Minho smiled, but there was no humor in it. Because those civilizations fight like civilized beings. They follow rules. They try to minimize casualties. They negotiate. They show mercy to defeated enemies. He gestured to the holographic displays showing Earth's military forces. We are not civilized when it comes to war. We never have been. Dr. Sora pulled up new data. I have been analyzing the battle reports from the Galactic Alliance forces. They fight fleet-to-fleet battles in open space. They announce their attacks. They give warnings before firing. They try to disable enemy ships rather than destroy them completely. Like gentlemen dueling with swords, growled General Hyok. Meanwhile, the Vorthak fight to consume and survive. Exactly, said Admiral Minho, but we know how to fight dirty. We know how to be ruthless. We know how to win at any cost. Intelligence Director Jiwon brought up tactical assessments. The aliens are right about one thing. The Vorthak have massive numerical superiority. Our entire space fleet has maybe 300 ships capable of interstellar combat. They have thousands. Numbers are not everything, replied Admiral Minho. How many Vorthak ships have faced an enemy that uses nuclear weapons as standard ammunition? How many have fought opponents who consider ramming attacks acceptable tactics? Fleet Admiral Inseo nodded slowly. The alien species fight wars like sports matches. They have rules about what weapons are acceptable, what targets are legitimate, how much damage is proportional. We fight wars like wars, said General Hyok. Total conflict until one side cannot continue. President Yoonji looked around the table. Are we seriously considering taking on an empire that spans thousands of star systems? We are considering keeping a promise, Admiral Minho replied. Captain Do-hyun looked a desperate alien in the eye and said we would help. That means something. Commander Junho pulled up logistics reports. Even if we commit every ship we have, it will take months to reach Vorthak space. By then, how many more worlds will they have consumed? That is why we do not fight them in Vorthak space, said Admiral Minho. We make them come to us. The room fell silent as everyone processed this statement. Dr. Sora was the first to understand. You want to use ourselves as bait. The Vorthak. Go where the food is, Admiral Minho explained. If we start hitting their forces hard enough, they will send fleets to stop us. We choose the battleground. We choose the terms of engagement. Intelligence Director Jiwon looked worried. That is incredibly dangerous. If we lose, Earth becomes their next target. If we do nothing, Earth becomes their target eventually anyway, President Yoonji pointed out. The Vorthak will not stop until they have consumed everything. General Hyok studied the star charts. Where do we make our stand? Admiral Minho highlighted a system on the display. Kepler 442. The Vorthak are currently strip mining the colonies there. Perfect opportunity to introduce ourselves. Dr. Sora looked at the battle plans taking shape. What about the Galactic Council? They specifically told us they do not want our help. They told us they do not want our help, Admiral Minho corrected. They did not tell us we could not act independently. To protect human interests, Fleet Admiral Inseo smiled grimly. And if we happen to save some alien refugees while protecting human space routes, that is just a fortunate coincidence. President Yoonji made her decision. Admiral Minho, you have authorization to activate the Damocles Protocol. Commit whatever forces you think necessary. The Damocles Protocol was humanity's most classified military contingency plan. It had been developed for exactly this type of scenario, total war against an existential threat. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy that the human species had ever devised for warfare was included. Admiral Minho stood up straighter. Commander Junho, I want every available ship ready for departure within 72 hours. Fleet Admiral Inseo, prepare the orbital defense platforms for full activation. General Hyuk, put all ground forces on high alert. What about rules of engagement? Asked Commander Junho. There are no rules, Admiral Minho replied coldly. The Vorthak chose to fight without mercy. We will accommodate them. Dr. Sora gathered her research materials. I will continue analyzing Vorthak biology. If we are going to fight them, we need to know how to kill them efficiently. Intelligence Director Jiwon began planning reconnaissance missions. I will coordinate with any alien refugees who can provide intelligence about Vorthak tactics and capabilities. As the meeting broke up, President Yoonji pulled Admiral Minho aside. Are you certain about this course of action? The Admiral looked at the holographic displays still showing the devastated worlds left behind by the Vorthak advance. Madam President, those creatures eat children to break the spirits of their parents. They turn conquered peoples into slave armies. They have wiped out 12 entire civilizations. He met her eyes directly. Yes, I am certain. The galaxy begged for help. We are going to give them exactly what they need. 3 days later, the largest human fleet ever assembled departed from Earth orbit. At its head flew the dreadnought Inchons. Fury, with Admiral Minho commanding from the bridge. As the ships engaged their faster-than-light drives, Admiral Minho recorded a message for transmission to the Galactic Council. This is Admiral Minho of the United Earth Defense Force. You begged for help against the Vorthak Empire. You dismissed our offer because you think we are too primitive to understand the threat. You are about to learn why human history is written in blood and ash. We are coming. The message would reach the Galactic Council just as the human fleet arrived at Kepler 442. By then, it would be too late for anyone to stop what humanity was about to unleash. The Kepler 442 system had once been home to 2 billion beings across 3 worlds. Now it was a feeding ground. Massive Vorthak harvester ships hung in orbit like metal tumors, draining the planets below of everything useful. Smaller vessels moved between the worlds like scavenger insects, carrying resources back to the main fleet. Commander Taejin watched the scene from the bridge of his destroyer, Gwangju's Wrath. The human fleet had dropped out of faster-than-light, travel at the edge of the system, where the Vorthak sensors could not detect them immediately. What they saw made even hardened soldiers feel sick. Sensors show 47 Vorthak vessels, reported Lieutenant Bowman from the tactical station. 15 heavy harvesters, 20 medium cruisers, 12 light scouts. What about survivors on the planets? Asked Commander Taejun. Some life signs, replied Ensign Yunji at the science station. But they are fading fast. The Vorthak are systematically draining the atmosphere from all three worlds. Admiral Minho's voice came over the communications system from the flagship. All ships, this is Admiral Minho. What you see here is what the Vorthak do to every world they conquer. Total consumption, complete destruction, no survivors. Commander Taejun looked at his crew. They were all young, all volunteers who had specifically requested assignment to this mission. When they learned what the Vorthak did to conquered populations, every single human military unit had seen a massive surge in volunteers. The Galactic Council fights these creatures with honor codes and rules of engagement, Admiral Minho continued. They announce their attacks. They target only military vessels. They offer chances to surrender. This is why they lose every battle. On the main display, Commander Taejun could see the Vorthak ships continuing their grim work. They had not even noticed the human fleet yet. They were too busy consuming the remains of an entire civilization. We do not fight with honor codes. Admiral Minho's voice was cold as space itself. We fight to win. All ships, execute attack pattern Omega. Target everything that moves. No warnings. No mercy. Show them what happens when humans go to war. Commander Taejun smiled grimly. Attack pattern Omega was one of the most brutal tactics in human military doctrine. It involved simultaneous strikes from multiple directions, targeting civilian infrastructure that the enemy was using and accepting massive casualties to achieve victory. All stations prepare for combat, Commander Taejun ordered. Lieutenant Bowman, lock weapons on the nearest harvester ship. Ensign Yunji, prepare boarding pods. We are going to introduce the Vorthak to human warfare. The human fleet spread out as they approached the inner system. To alien observers, their formation would look chaotic and undisciplined. Most galactic species fought in neat formations with clearly defined roles for each ship type. The humans swarmed like angry wasps. The first Vorthak scout ship detected the human fleet when they were only 10 minutes away from the main body. The alien vessel immediately broadcast a challenge in the standard galactic diplomatic frequency, demanding identification and stating intentions. Commander Taejun laughed when he heard the translation. They want to know who we are and what we want. Should we respond, sir? Asked Communications Officer Dohee. Yes, Commander Taejun replied. Tell them we are humans, and we want them all dead. The response seemed to confuse the Vorthak. Their ships began moving into standard defensive formations. They had fought dozens of different species and always saw the same patterns: organized battle lines, careful maneuvering, attempts at negotiation, before combat began. What they got instead was chaos. The human destroyers hit them from 4 different directions at once. Instead of the careful long-range bombardments that galactic fleets preferred, the humans closed to point-blank range and unleashed everything they had. Nuclear torpedoes, plasma cannons, kinetic missiles, and weapons that the Vorthak had never seen before. Commander Taejun's ship dove straight at the largest harvester. Lieutenant Bowman, fire everything we have at their main processing center. Sir, that will cause a massive explosion. We are too close to escape the blast. Then we better hold on tight, Commander Taejun replied. The Gwangju's wrath emptied its entire arsenal into the Vorthak harvester at point-blank range. The alien ship's biomechanical hull tried to adapt to the incoming weapons, but human technology was completely unknown to it. Nuclear warheads designed to crack asteroids tore through armor meant to resist energy weapons. The harvester exploded in a chain reaction that lit up the entire system. Commander Taejun's ship was caught in the blast wave and thrown tumbling through space. But it survived. The Vorthak ship and everything inside it was vaporized. Across the battle zone, similar scenes played out. The human ships fought like nothing the Vorthak had ever encountered. They rammed enemy vessels when their weapons ran out. They used their own ships as guided missiles. They targeted anything that looked important, regardless of whether it was a military target. Lieutenant Nari commanded a boarding pod launched from the cruiser Soul's Pride. Her mission was simple: get inside a Vorthak command ship and cause as much damage as possible. She had volunteered for this assignment, knowing it was almost certainly a suicide mission. The boarding pod smashed through the alien ship's hull like a bullet. Nari and her 12-person team emerged shooting. They had studied Vorthak anatomy and knew exactly where to aim. Their weapons were loaded with ammunition specifically designed to disrupt biomechanical systems. "Move fast," Nari ordered her team. "We need to reach their central command before they can adapt to our presence." The corridors of the Vorthak ship were nightmarish. Everything was organic, grown rather than built. The walls pulsed like living tissue. Strange lights flickered in patterns that hurt human eyes to look at. Worst of all was the smell, the scent of death and decay that permeated everything. They fought their way through waves of Vorthak defenders. The aliens were larger and stronger than humans, but they had never faced opponents who fought with such savage determination. Nari's team used tactics that no civilized species would consider: explosive traps, poisonous gases, weapons that caused maximum suffering. "Command center ahead," reported Sergeant Minsu, checking his scanner. "Heavy resistance between us and the target." "Then we go through them," Nari replied. She activated the nuclear device strapped to her chest. "Everyone link up for final assault. We end this here." What followed was the most brutal close-quarters fighting any of them had ever experienced. The Vorthak defenders threw everything they had at the human boarding party, but nothing could stop soldiers who knew they were already dead and just wanted to take as many enemies with them as possible. Nari reached the command center with only 3 team members still alive. The room was filled with Vorthak officers coordinating the fleet's movements. They turned to face the humans with surprise and horror. No boarding party had ever penetrated this deep into one of their ships. "For every child you devoured," Nari said, arming the nuclear device, "we send you to hell." The explosion took out the entire command ship and 2 nearby vessels. 50,000 Vorthak died in an instant. More importantly, the loss of the command ship threw the entire enemy fleet into confusion. The battle lasted only 3 hours. When it was over, every single Vorthak vessel in the system had been destroyed. Not one escaped to report what had happened. The human fleet had also taken heavy casualties: 12 ships lost, thousands of crew dead or wounded. But they had won. Completely and totally. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the debris field that had once been a Vorthak fleet. Around him, his officers were already planning the next phase of operations. "Sir," reported Commander Subin, "from communications, we are receiving a transmission from the Vorthak High Command. They want to know what happened to their fleet." Admiral Minho smiled coldly. "Send them our response." The message that went out to the Vorthak Empire was short and simple. This was mercy. Withdraw from all occupied systems, or we will show you what humans call war. The Vorthak High Command received the message 6 hours later. For the first time in their empire's history, they felt something they had never experienced before. They felt fear. High Overlord Kathak had ruled the Vorthak Empire for over 2 centuries. In all that time, no enemy had ever made him feel what he felt now. Rage mixed with something he barely recognized as fear. The loss of an entire fleet to unknown attackers was impossible. It had never happened before. He stood in the center of his war chamber, a massive organic space that pulsed with bioluminescent displays showing the Empire's vast territories. His advisors surrounded him, their feeding tentacles writhing with nervous energy. "Show me the battle records again," Kathak commanded. War leader Vex activated the holographic display. The recorded images from the Kepler 442 system played out in horrifying detail, ships that fought without honor or strategy, enemies that rammed their vessels into Vorthak forces rather than retreat, boarding parties that used nuclear weapons against their own people rather than allow capture. These humans, they fight like animals, hissed Subcommander Gorth. They have no regard for proper warfare protocols. They destroyed 47 ships without losing a single vessel to capture, War Leader Vex reported. Our analysis teams found no survivors to interrogate. Every human who died took as many of our forces with them as possible. High Overlord Kethak studied the tactical data. The human ships were smaller and less advanced than Vorthak vessels. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. By all logic, they should have been easily defeated. They sent us a message, communications drone Hisk announced. It says, "This was mercy. Withdraw from all occupied systems, or we will show you what humans call war." The war chamber fell silent, except for the organic sounds of the ship itself. The idea that any species would threaten the Vorthak Empire was beyond imagination. The concept that they might actually be capable of backing up such threats was terrifying. Mercy? Kethak's voice was a low growl. They think that slaughter was mercy? The humans appear to operate under completely different rules of warfare, War Leader Vex analyzed. They target non-military assets. They use weapons of mass destruction as standard armaments. They prefer close-range combat over strategic positioning. Then we will teach them the price of defying the Vorthak Empire, Kethak decided. Prepare. 3 full invasion fleets. I want these humans crushed completely. Make examples of their worlds that will terrify the galaxy for generations. War Leader Vex hesitated. High Overlord, perhaps we should study these humans more carefully before committing so many resources. No. Kethak's roar echoed through the chamber. We are the Vorthak. We have devoured 12 civilizations. We will not show weakness before a species that barely knows how to travel between stars. The 3 invasion fleets that departed for human space represented the largest military force the Vorthak had ever assembled for a single campaign. Over 300 ships, carrying millions of soldiers and enough firepower to crack planets. High Overlord Kethak himself led the assault, determined to personally oversee the destruction of this upstart species. Their target was the Proxima Centauri system, where human intelligence suggested they maintained important defensive installations. What the Vorthak expected to find was a desperate last stand by a primitive species facing overwhelming odds. What they found instead was the most carefully prepared trap in military history. General Hayek commanded the Proxima Centauri defense. Network from his command center buried deep beneath the system's primary asteroid belt. For 3 weeks, human engineers had been working around the clock to prepare for this moment. Every asteroid, every piece of space debris, every seemingly empty patch of vacuum had been weaponized. Vorthak fleet detected at system edge, reported Major Young-Ho from the sensor station. 317 vessels, including super-heavy dreadnoughts. Let them come, General Hayek replied calmly. Colonel Soyoung, are the orbital fortresses ready? Colonel Soyoung nodded from her position at the tactical display. All defensive platforms are online and fully armed. The asteroid field is prepared for activation. Captain Jinsu, how are our mobile units? Captain Jinsu checked his fighter. Squadron status. 250 pilots ready for launch. All volunteer crews, all fully briefed on kamikaze protocols. The Vorthak fleet entered the system in perfect formation, their massive ships blotting out stars as they advanced. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything that could seriously threaten them. Their sensors detected the human defensive positions exactly as intended. Multiple orbital fortresses detected, announced the sensor operator, aboard High Overlord Kethak's flagship. Approximately 30 installations in defensive formation around the primary star. Primitive static defenses, Kethak dismissed. Break them with long-range bombardment, then proceed to consume the human homeworlds. But the human defenses were far from primitive. As the Vorthak fleet closed to engagement range, the asteroids around them began to move. What looked like natural space debris revealed itself to be an enormous network of hidden weapons platforms, camouflaged mining ships converted to missile launchers, and automated defense systems. It's a trap, War Leader Vex realized, but too late. The asteroid field erupted with weapons fire. Nuclear missiles launched from hidden silos. Plasma cannons emerged from disguised installations. Most terrifying of all, entire asteroids began accelerating toward the Vorthak ships, their centers packed with antimatter explosives. General Hayek watched the battle unfold from his command center. All units, execute Operation Prometheus. Show them what happens when they threaten Earth. The human strategy was unlike anything the Vorthak had ever faced. Instead of meeting them in honorable ship-to-ship combat, the humans had turned an entire star system into a weapon. Every piece of matter in the Proxima Centauri system had been converted into some form of offensive capability. High Overlord Kethak's flagship shuddered under the impact of dozens of nuclear weapons. His biomechanical armor began adapting to the energy signatures, but the humans immediately switched to different types of weapons. Kinetic impactors, plasma bursts, gravitational bombs. They never used the same attack twice. "This is impossible," Kethak raged. "No species fights like this. Where is their honor? Where are their rules of engagement?" Captain Jinsu led his fighter squadron in a direct assault on the Vorthak command ship. His small craft were hopelessly outgunned by the massive alien vessel, but that was not the point. Each fighter carried a nuclear warhead and a pilot who had volunteered for a one-way mission. "All squadrons, final approach," Jinsu transmitted to his pilots. "Remember what these things did to the children on Kepler 442? Make them pay." The human fighters swarmed the Vorthak dreadnought like angry insects. Point defense systems shot down most of them, but enough got through. Captain Jinsu piloted his craft directly into the ship's main bridge, delivering his nuclear payload manually. As his fighter smashed through the armor plating, Jinsu transmitted his final message. "For every child you devoured, we will take 1,000 of you." The explosion vaporized the entire command section of the Vorthak flagship. High Overlord Kethak died instantly, along with his entire senior command staff. The loss of leadership threw the invasion fleet into chaos just as the human counterattack reached full intensity. Colonel Soyoung activated the final phase of the defense plan. "All orbital fortresses, target the disabled vessels. No survivors, no prisoners, no mercy." What followed was not a battle, but an execution. The human weapons platforms systematically destroyed every Vorthak ship in the system. When enemy vessels tried to retreat, hidden missile platforms activated throughout the outer system, cutting off all escape routes. The entire Vorthak invasion fleet was annihilated. 317 ships, millions of soldiers, the cream of their empires, military might, all destroyed in less than 6 hours. Not a single vessel escaped to report what had happened. General Hayek transmitted a message toward Vorthak space as the last enemy ship was destroyed. "This was your answer to our mercy. Now you will see what humans call war." News of the disaster reached the Vorthak homeworld 3 days later. For the first time in their species' history, the ruling council considered the impossible: retreat. The humans had done something no enemy had ever accomplished. They had made the Vorthak Empire afraid. The news of the Proxima Centauri massacre spread through both empires like wildfire. In the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Yuki stared at the reports with disbelief. The primitive human species that had been dismissed as irrelevant had accomplished the impossible. They had not just defeated a Vorthak fleet, they had annihilated it completely. "How is this possible?" Elder Korath demanded, his ancient voice shaking. The humans have only been spacefaring for 50 years. The Vorthak Empire has conquered civilizations for millennia. Captain Do Yun, now promoted to ambassador after his unauthorized promise, stood before the assembly. His calm demeanor had not changed, but something cold and dangerous lurked behind his dark eyes. "You fought them like civilized beings," Do Hyun explained simply. "You followed rules they ignored. You showed mercy they never reciprocated. You tried to minimize casualties, while they maximized consumption. And your solution is to abandon all principles of civilized warfare?" demanded Councillor Vrex of the Trade Federation. "Our solution is to win," Do Hyun replied without emotion. The Vorthak chose to eat children and enslave populations. They made themselves into something that cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or reformed. Therefore, they must be destroyed. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Admiral Minho was putting humanity's next phase into motion. Operation Prometheus was not a defensive strategy. It was a campaign of total warfare aimed directly at the Vorthak heartland. Fleet Admiral Inseo commanded the main battle group from the heavy cruiser Busan's Vengeance. Unlike the defensive operation at Proxima Centauri, this was an offensive campaign designed to carry the war deep into enemy territory. "Intelligence reports suggest the Vorthak are pulling back their frontier fleets," reported Commander Subin from the intelligence station. "They appear to be consolidating around their core systems." "Good," Admiral Minho replied from his flagship. "Fear makes them predictable. When a predator becomes afraid, it retreats to its den. That is where we will corner them." Intelligence Director Jiwan had spent weeks coordinating with freed slave populations throughout Vorthak space. The aliens had been so confident in their superiority that they had never bothered to properly secure their conquered territories. Now, those same populations were rising in rebellion, guided by human special forces. Major Hana led one such operation on the mining world of Corvex 7. Her team of 30 humans had been inserted secretly to coordinate with local resistance fighters, survivors of 3 different species that the Vorthak had enslaved but not yet consumed. "The Vorthak garrison here numbers approximately 10,000 soldiers," reported the local resistance leader, a being called Talk, whose people resembled walking crystals. "They use our own people as slave labor in the mines." Major Hana studied the intelligence reports. The Vorthak had made a critical error in their treatment of conquered populations. Instead of simply consuming everyone immediately, they kept some alive as workers. Those workers remembered what freedom felt like. "How many of your people want to fight?" Hana asked. "All of them," Tok replied simply. "But we have no weapons, no training, no hope of victory." "We will provide the weapons and training," Hana said. "As for hope," she smiled grimly, "the Vorthak Empire has lost 2 entire fleets to human forces. Their myth of invincibility is broken. That is all the hope you need." The uprising on Corvex 7 began at dawn, timed to coordinate with similar rebellions across dozens of Vorthak-controlled worlds. The aliens had grown complacent after centuries of easy victories. They never expected their slaves to fight back, especially not with human weapons and training. Major Hana led the assault on the main garrison compound. Her team had trained the local resistance in human tactics, hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, psychological warfare, and most importantly, the principle of total commitment. "No prisoners," Hana ordered as they breached the compound walls. "The Vorthak showed no mercy to your families. Show them none in return." The battle was savage and one-sided. The Vorthak soldiers were powerful individually, but they had never faced enemies who fought with such coordinated ferocity. The human-trained resistance fighters used tactics that no civilized species would consider, poisoning water supplies, booby-trapping corpses, using children as scouts and messengers. Within 6 hours, The entire garrison was dead. Not a single Vorthak soldier survived to report the uprising. The liberated world began broadcasting human-designed propaganda throughout the sector, encouraging other slave populations to rise up. Fleet Admiral Inseo received reports of successful uprisings from 17 different worlds within the first week of Operation Prometheus. Each rebellion weakened Vorthak logistics and forced them to divert troops from their main fleets. "The enemy is responding exactly as predicted," reported strategic analyst Yura from the war room aboard Inseo's flagship. "They are pulling forces back from their expansion zones to deal with the uprisings, which leaves their frontier territories vulnerable to direct assault," Admiral Minho noted with satisfaction. "Commander Junho, begin Phase 2 of the operation." Commander Junho led a strike force of 50 ships toward the Vorthak industrial complex at Zerion Prime. This was one of their major shipbuilding facilities where they grew their biomechanical fleets. Intelligence suggested it was lightly defended due to the emergency redeployments. The human fleet approached Zerion Prime using a tactic they called wolf pack hunting. Instead of advancing in formation, they spread out across the system and attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. The Vorthak defenders found themselves fighting 6 different battles at once. "Target the shipyards first," Junho ordered. "Destroy their ability to replace their losses." The human ships dove in close to the orbital construction facilities, ignoring the defensive fire to deliver point-blank nuclear strikes. The Vorthak shipyards, designed to grow new vessels over months or years, were completely unprepared for such direct assault. Commander Taejun, now promoted after his success at Kepler 442, led a boarding action against the main command station. His mission was to capture intelligence about Vorthak fleet movements and future plans. "Remember," Taejun told his assault team as their boarding pods launched, "we need someone alive to interrogate, but make sure they understand the price of resistance." The boarding action was swift and brutal. Human soldiers had studied Vorthak anatomy extensively and knew exactly how to inflict maximum pain without causing immediate death. Within an hour, they had captured the station commander and several technical specialists. The interrogation techniques used were not ones that any civilized species would approve of, but they were effective. Within 6 hours, the humans had complete intelligence on Vorthak fleet positions, supply lines, and strategic planning. "They are planning a massive counterattack," Intelligence Director Ji-won reported to Admiral Minho after analyzing the captured data. "Every available ship converging on human space for a final decisive battle." "Perfect," Admiral Minho replied. "Let them come. We will be ready." Back on Earth, Dr. Sora had been working around the clock to develop new weapons specifically designed to counter Vorthak biology. Her research team had made several breakthrough discoveries about the aliens' physiological weaknesses. "Their biomechanical technology has one critical flaw," she reported to the Defense Council. "It relies on neural connections between the ship and its crew. Disrupt those connections, and their vessels become helpless." The new weapons Dr. Sora developed were unlike anything in galactic warfare. Neural disruptors that could paralyze Vorthak crews. Biological agents that attacked their cellular structure. Sonic weapons that interfered with their communication organs. "These weapons violate every treaty on biological warfare," President Yoonji noted after reviewing the designs. "The Vorthak are not signatories to those treaties," Dr. Sora replied coldly. "They chose to make this a war of extinction. We are simply giving them what they asked for." As reports continued to pour in from Operation Prometheus, it became clear that the campaign was exceeding all expectations. 17 worlds liberated, 3 major shipyards destroyed, countless Vorthak supply lines severed. The empire that had seemed invincible was collapsing from within. But Admiral Minho knew this was only the beginning. The real test would come when the Vorthak Empire committed everything to one final assault. When that happened, humanity would have to prove that their early victories were not just luck. "All forces prepare for Phase 3. Admiral Minho ordered. "The Vorthak are coming with everything they have. Let us show them what happens when predators meet an apex predator." The stage was set for the largest space battle in galactic history. On one side, the Vorthak Empire, desperate to preserve their dominance. On the other, humanity, determined to end the threat forever. Only one species would survive the coming storm. The Vorthak fortress world of Korthax Prime had never been successfully attacked in 800 years of warfare. Its massive orbital defense platforms could shatter asteroids. Its surface was covered with military installations that housed millions of soldiers. Most importantly, it was the heart of the Vorthak Empire's war machine. Commander Wu Jin studied the tactical displays aboard his assault ship Daegu's Hammer. The intelligence gathered from captured Vorthak officers had revealed that Korthax Prime was where the Empire planned to make its final stand. Every remaining fleet, every available soldier, every weapon they possessed had been concentrated here. Sensor readings show over 2,000 Vorthak ships in defensive positions, reported Lieutenant Moran from the tactical station, plus approximately 50 orbital fortresses and an estimated 10 million ground troops. "What about the planetary defenses?" asked Major Sunwoo, who commanded the Marine assault units. "Shields that can stop nuclear bombardment," Moran replied. "Atmospheric processors that can poison any breathable air. And something new, biological weapons designed specifically to target human physiology." Commander Wu Jin smiled coldly. The Vorthak had learned from their early defeats and adapted their defenses to counter human tactics. But they still did not understand what they were truly fighting. "They think this is still a war," Wu Jin said. "They do not understand that we are not here to conquer Korthax Prime. We are here to erase it from existence." Admiral Minho had made the decision 3 weeks earlier. The Vorthak Empire could not be defeated through conventional warfare. It had to be destroyed so completely that it could never threaten anyone again. That meant abandoning all pretense of civilized rules of engagement. Dr. Yuna had worked with a team of military scientists to develop what they called planet killer protocols. These were not just weapons of mass destruction, they were tools designed to make entire worlds uninhabitable for centuries. "The orbital bombardment will begin with conventional nuclear weapons," Dr. Yuna explained to the fleet commanders during their final briefing. "This will force the Vorthak defenders to activate their shields and atmospheric protection. Once their defenses are committed, we switch to the new weapons," added Major Gunwoo, who specialized in siege warfare. "Gravitational bombs to destabilize their orbital platforms, biological agents to corrupt their atmosphere, and finally, thermal lances to crack the planet's crust." The assault on Korthax Prime began exactly at noon, coordinated across 17 different time zones on the planet below. The human fleet had grown to over 800 ships reinforced by vessels from every liberated world in Vorthak space. "All ships commence Operation Ragnarok," Admiral Minho ordered from his flagship. "Show them the price of threatening children." The first wave of attacks targeted the orbital defenses. Human ships swarmed the massive Vorthak platforms like angry insects, using tactics that no sane military commander would consider. Ships rammed themselves into defensive positions. Boarding parties carried nuclear weapons into reactor cores. Fighters loaded with antimatter dove directly into command centers. Commander Wu Jin led his assault ship in a direct attack on the largest orbital fortress. The Vorthak defenders threw everything they had at the incoming humans, but nothing could stop warriors who were already dead and just wanted to take their enemies with them. "Target their main reactor," Wu Jin ordered as his ship penetrated the fortress's defenses. "Full power to weapons. Ignore all damage reports." The Daegu's Hammer smashed through layer after layer of defensive systems, taking massive damage but refusing to stop. When the ship's main engines failed, Wu Jin used the emergency thrusters. When the weapons systems were destroyed, he used the ship itself as a guided missile. The orbital fortress exploded in a chain reaction that lit up the entire system. Commander Wu Jin died in the blast. But his sacrifice took out one of Korthak's Prime's most important defensive installations. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human commanders threw their ships and crews at Vorthak positions with suicidal determination. Each attack was calculated to cause maximum damage to the enemy, regardless of cost to themselves. Major Gunwoo coordinated the second phase of the assault from his command ship in the outer system. As the Vorthak orbital defenses crumbled under the human onslaught, he began implementing the planet killer protocols. Gravitational bombs away, reported Weapons Officer Kyung-hee. Target: Vorthak shipyards on the northern continent. The gravitational weapons were humanity's newest and most terrifying creation. Instead of simply destroying targets, they warped space-time itself, creating localized black holes that consumed everything within a 100-kilometer radius. The Vorthak shipyards vanished into twisted space, taking 3 million workers and soldiers with them. But that was only the beginning. Biological agents deployed, announced Lieutenant Colonel Jimin, targeting atmospheric processors and water supplies. Dr. Yuna's biological weapons were designed specifically to target Vorthak physiology while leaving other species unharmed. The agents spread through the planet's atmosphere like a plague, seeking out and destroying anything with Vorthak genetic markers. The Vorthak defenders on the surface began dying by the millions. Their biomechanical technology, so effective against conventional weapons, was helpless against agents that attacked them at the cellular level. Thermal lances charging, reported Major Gunwoo, preparing to crack the planetary crust. The thermal lances were the most devastating weapons in the human arsenal. They fired concentrated beams of stellar-level energy directly into a planet's core, causing massive geological instability. The first lance strike hit Korthak's Prime's northern hemisphere, penetrating through the crust and into the mantle below. The planet shuddered as tectonic plates shifted and magma began erupting across the surface. Second lance, target the southern hemisphere, Major Gunwoo ordered. Let us finish this. As the thermal weapons carved through Korthak's Prime's crust, the planet began to literally come apart. Massive earthquakes shattered continents. Volcanic eruptions poisoned the atmosphere. The very ground itself turned into molten slag. The Vorthak, High Command, trapped in their underground bunkers, sent desperate messages to the human fleet. For the first time in their empire's history, they were trying to surrender. Admiral Minho received the surrender offers aboard his flagship. He read them carefully, then composed his response. You had your chance to surrender when you chose to devour children. Now face the consequences of your choices. The final phase of Operation Ragnarok involved Captain Mijin and her ship, the Busan's Revenge. Intelligence had discovered that the Vorthak were attempting to activate a superweapon buried deep in Korthak's Prime's core, a device capable of destroying entire star systems. I need a volunteer for a suicide mission, Admiral Minho announced over the fleet communication system. 1 ship, 1 crew, to prevent the Vorthak from taking half the galaxy. With them, Captain Mijin responded immediately. Busan's Revenge volunteering, sir. We are already committed. Her ship dove through the dying planet's atmosphere, fighting through debris fields and energy storms to reach the superweapon facility. The Vorthak threw everything they had left at the incoming vessel, but nothing could stop a captain and crew who knew they were humanity's last hope. All stations, prepare for impact, Captain Mijin ordered, as her ship penetrated the facility's defenses. It has been an honor serving with you all. The Busan's Revenge, loaded with every nuclear weapon the ship could carry, rammed directly into the superweapon's core chamber. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away. Korthak's Prime died in fire and radiation. The planet that had been the heart of a galactic empire became a molten ball of radioactive slag, uninhabitable for 1,000 years. More importantly, the Vorthak Empire's capacity to make war died with it. The surviving Vorthak ships scattered to the edges of space, leaderless and broken. Their mighty empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, collapsed in a matter of hours. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the glowing remains of what had once been a world. Around him, his officers prepared reports on casualties and damage assessments. The human fleet had paid a terrible price for this victory, over 200 ships lost, tens of thousands of crew dead, but it was finished. The Vorthak Empire was no more. Send a message to the Galactic Council, Admiral Minho ordered. Tell them the threat has been permanently eliminated. Communications Officer Do-hee looked uncertain. Sir, what about the survivors? There are still scattered Vorthak fleets throughout the galaxy. Admiral Minho's expression did not change. There are no survivors. We will hunt down every last one of them. The Vorthak chose to be a threat to children. That choice has consequences. The message that went out to the Galactic Council was simple. The Vorthak Empire is finished. Any remaining elements will be located and destroyed. The threat to galactic civilization has been permanently eliminated. But even as humanity celebrated its victory, the galaxy was beginning to understand a new reality. The species that had saved them from the Vorthak threat was now the most powerful military force in known space. And unlike the civilized empires that had ruled before, humans fought wars to win them completely. 6 months after the destruction of Korthak's Prime, the galaxy was a very different place. The Vorthak Empire had collapsed completely, its scattered remnants hunted down and destroyed by relentless human pursuit fleets. What remained of their conquered territories was being liberated and rebuilt. But the price of victory was becoming clear to everyone. Ambassador Kyung stood before the Galactic Council, facing an assembly that looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and fear. The same species that had begged for human help now questioned whether their saviors had gone too far. The Vorthak threat has been eliminated, Ambassador Kyung reported in her calm, measured voice. Our search and destroy missions have located and neutralized the last known fleet elements. The empire that terrorized this galaxy for centuries no longer exists. Elder Korath leaned forward in his floating chair. Despite his gratitude for humanity's intervention, he could not ignore what had happened. Ambassador Kyung, your forces have destroyed not just military targets but entire worlds. The methods used, they violate every principle of civilized warfare. The Vorthak violated every principle of civilized existence, Ambassador Kyung replied without emotion. They chose to devour children. They chose to enslave entire populations. They chose to make war against innocent beings. We simply gave them the war they wanted. Councillor Vrex of the Trade Federation looked uncomfortable. But the scale of destruction. Korthak's Prime was home to billions of beings. Many of them were slaves, not willing participants in Vorthak aggression. And those slaves are now free, Ambassador Kyung pointed out. Free to rebuild their civilizations without fear of being consumed. The galaxy is safe because the Vorthak Empire no longer exists to threaten it. The liberated species saw things very differently than the established. Galactic powers, Ambassador Yuki, whose own people had been among the first to be saved by human intervention, stood to address the assembly. The honored council speaks of principles and proportional response, Yuki said, her voice strong with conviction. Where were those principles when the Vorthak consumed my home world? Where was proportional response when they fed our children to their offspring? She turned to face the human representative. Ambassador Kyung, my people owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You came when no one else could help us. You did what no one else was willing to do. Similar testimonials came from representatives of the 17 species that had been liberated from Vorthak control. To them, humanity's brutal efficiency was not a problem. It was salvation. But the older, more established civilizations were deeply troubled by what they had witnessed. The Humans had demonstrated a capacity for warfare that went beyond anything in galactic history. They fought without mercy, without restraint, without any consideration for the conventions that had governed conflict for millennia. General Dai-Yun oversaw the occupation and reconstruction efforts from his headquarters on the former Vorthak world of Zirion Prime. The planet had been one of their major industrial centers, and now it served as the hub for human military operations in the liberated territories. Status report on the reconstruction efforts, General Daeun requested from his staff. Colonel Minji consulted her datapad. 17 worlds now have functioning governments. Medical aid has been distributed to all refugee populations. Industrial capacity is being rebuilt on 12 worlds. What about security? Asked Major Wanbin, who commanded the occupation forces. Human military bases have been established on 23 strategic worlds, Colonel Minji reported. Fleet. Patrols are maintaining order throughout the former Vorthak space. No major incidents of piracy or civil unrest. The human approach to occupation was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of simply declaring victory and withdrawing, they had committed to long-term presence in the liberated territories. Massive military bases, defensive installations, and administrative centers were being constructed across dozens of worlds. General Dai-Yun studied the deployment maps. The Galactic Council is asking when we plan to withdraw our forces. What do we tell them? Asked Colonel Minji. We tell them that we will withdraw when we are satisfied that the threat has been permanently eliminated, General Daeun replied. Until then, these territories remain under human protection. This position was causing increasing tension with the established galactic powers. The Galactic Council had expected humanity to defeat the Vorthak and then return to their previous status as a minor species. Instead, they had become the dominant military force in known space and showed no intention of giving up that position. President Yunji addressed these concerns during a diplomatic meeting with council representatives. Her message was clear and uncompromising. You asked for our help when your own forces could not stop the Vorthak threat, President Yunji reminded them. We provided that help at enormous cost in human lives and resources. Now you want us to simply walk away and pretend that similar threats cannot emerge in the future. The balance of galactic power has been fundamentally altered, Elder Korath argued. Humanity now controls more territory and resources than any single species in history. Because we were willing to do what was necessary to protect innocent lives, President Yunji replied. If that disturbs the established order, perhaps the established order was part of the problem. The liberated species were already making their choice. One by one, they began signing formal alliance agreements with humanity rather than seeking readmission to the Galactic Council. The terms were simple: human military protection in exchange for trade agreements and basing rights. Ambassador Kyung explained the human position to species considering alliance membership. We do not seek to conquer or control, we seek to protect. But protection requires strength, and strength requires commitment. Half measures lead to situations like the Vorthak Empire. Dr. Sora had established joint research programs between human scientists and their alien counterparts. The technological exchange was benefiting all allied species, but it was also strengthening human military capabilities even further. The gravitational weapons technology can be adapted for peaceful purposes, Dr. Sora explained to a mixed human-alien research team. Asteroid mining, planetary engineering, deep space construction, the applications are limitless. But the same technology that could build new worlds could also destroy them. Every innovation that emerged from the joint research programs had dual-use potential, and humanity was not sharing their most advanced military secrets with anyone. The transformation of galactic politics accelerated when a new threat emerged from the galactic rim. Long-range sensors detected massive ships approaching from deep space, vessels of unknown origin moving toward inhabited systems. The Galactic Council's initial response was predictable. They formed committees to study the threat. They sent diplomatic messages to the unknown ships. They debated the appropriate level of response in lengthy sessions. Humanity's response was much simpler. Admiral Minho began mobilizing the human fleet before the Council had even finished analyzing the sensor data. "Unknown vessels approaching inhabited space," Admiral Minho announced to his fleet commanders. "Intent unknown, capabilities unknown, but they are heading directly toward populated systems." "Should we wait for Council authorization?" asked Fleet Admiral Inseo. "The Council can authorize whatever they want," Admiral Minho replied. "We protect our allies first. Ask permission later." When Ambassador Yuki learned that humanity was preparing to intercept the unknown threat, she immediately contacted the human embassy. Her message was simple. "My people request human protection. We do not trust the Council to act quickly enough." Within hours, similar requests were flooding in from all the liberated species. They had seen what happened when civilized responses failed against existential threats. They wanted the protection of the species that had actually proven capable of stopping galactic-scale dangers. Ambassador Kyung presented the Council with an ultimatum. 16 species have formally requested human military protection against this new threat. We are obligated by treaty to provide that protection. You can either coordinate with our response or stay out of our way. Elder Korath realized that the galactic order had already changed beyond recognition. "You are forcing us to choose between accepting human dominance or abandoning our allies to face unknown dangers alone." "We are offering you the same choice you gave us," Ambassador Kyung replied. "Stand with those who fight to protect innocent lives, or stand aside and let others do what you cannot." As human fleets moved out to intercept the approaching threat, the galaxy watched with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The species that had saved them from the Vorthak Empire was about to face another test. But this time, they would not be fighting alone. This time they had allies who understood that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be willing to wage total war against those who would destroy it. The age of human dominance in galactic affairs had begun, built on the simple principle that had guided their response to the Vorthak threat. When innocent lives are at stake, there are no acceptable half measures. 5 years had passed since the fall of the Vorthak Empire, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to what it had been before. The old Galactic Council still existed, but its influence had waned dramatically. Real power now rested with the Human Protection Alliance, a coalition of 37 species that looked to humanity for leadership and security. Grand Admiral Minho stood on the observation deck of the massive space station orbiting Earth. Through the reinforced transparasteel windows, he could see ships from dozens of different species docking at the facility. What had once been humanity's home system was now the de facto capital of galactic civilization. "Status report on the integration programs," Grand Admiral Minho requested from his aide, Commander Subin. "All allied species have successfully adopted human military doctrine," Commander Subin reported. "Joint training exercises are proceeding ahead of schedule. Technology transfer programs have improved defensive capabilities across all member worlds." The transformation had been remarkable. Species that had once fought according to ancient codes of honor now employed the brutal efficiency that humanity had perfected. They had learned that survival required adaptation, and adaptation meant abandoning comfortable illusions about civilized warfare. Dr. Sora had become the director of the largest research consortium in galactic history. Her laboratories on 17 different worlds were developing technologies that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. The gravitational manipulation technology has revolutionized construction and mining operations, Dr. Sora explained to a gathering of allied scientists. "We can now build orbital installations in weeks rather than years. Asteroid mining operations have increased mineral production by 3,000%. But the same technology that built new worlds could unmake them just as easily. Every innovation that emerged from the research programs served dual purposes, and humanity maintained strict control over the most dangerous applications. Captain Do-hyun, now serving as the chief diplomatic liaison with non-allied species, worked to manage the delicate relationships between the Human Protection Alliance and the remaining independent civilizations. The Zentari Confederation is requesting observer status in our alliance, Captain Do-hyun reported during a diplomatic briefing. They want the protection benefits without the military commitments. Standard response, replied Foreign Minister Ji-won. Full membership with all obligations, or no membership at all. We do not provide selective protection to species that are not fully committed to collective defense. The human approach to alliance management was characteristically direct. Either species were willing to contribute to mutual defense, or they were on their own. There were no free riders in the Human Protection Alliance. The old Galactic Council had tried to maintain relevance by criticizing human methods and calling for a return to traditional diplomatic solutions. But their protests rang hollow when new threats appeared. The first test of the new galactic order came when long-range sensors detected the approaching Devourer fleet. These were not raiders or conquerors like the Vorthak. They were something far worse. The Devourers consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space behind them. Elder Korath, now representing a much diminished Galactic Council, arrived at the Human Protection Alliance headquarters with a delegation of the Old Guard species. This new threat requires a coordinated galactic response, Elder Korath argued. The Devourers are moving toward both Alliance and non-Alliance territories. Surely this is a time to put aside our differences. Ambassador Do-hyun listened politely to the Elder's proposal. When it was finished, his response was measured but firm. You are asking for human protection while offering nothing in return, Do-hyun observed. Your species criticized our methods when we eliminated the Vorthak threat. You called us barbaric and uncivilized. Now you want us to save you again. The scale of this threat requires unity, Elder Korath pleaded. Surely you understand that some enemies are too large for any single alliance to face. The Vorthak Empire was too large for the old Galactic Council to face, Do-hyun replied. But our alliance faced it and won. We will face this threat as well, but only for our members. The message was clear. Join the Human Protection Alliance with full commitments, or face the Devourers alone. Grand Admiral Minho oversaw the preparation for what would become known as the Devourer War. Unlike the chaotic response to the Vorthak threat, this time humanity had 5 years to prepare and 36 allied species to assist. Intelligence reports confirm the Devourer fleet consists of approximately 5,000 vessels, reported Intelligence Director Yura. Each ship appears to be capable of planetary consumption operations. What about their tactical capabilities? Asked Fleet Admiral Inseo. Unknown, Yura admitted. They have not engaged any known forces in direct combat. They simply arrive at a system, consume everything, and move on. Grand Admiral Minho studied the strategic projections. The Devourer. Fleet was massive, but it was also following a predictable path through the galaxy. That predictability could be exploited. We will not wait for them to reach inhabited systems, Grand Admiral Minho decided. Operation Extinction begins immediately. We intercept them in deep space and destroy them completely. The human fleet that departed to face the Devourers was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Over 2,000 ships representing 37 different species, all fighting under human command using human tactics. But the humans were not alone in their determination. The liberated species remembered what it felt like to be helpless against an existential threat. They would never allow themselves to be victims again. Commander Taejun, now an admiral commanding an entire battle group, led the advance screening force. His ships were crewed by veterans of the Vorthak War, beings who had learned that survival required absolute commitment. Enemy fleet detected at maximum sensor range, reported his tactical officer. a Talani named Zuki, who had volunteered for human military service after her homeworld's liberation. Confirming 5,000+ vessels of unknown configuration. All ships, prepare for engagement, Admiral Tajan ordered. Remember what we learned from the Vorthak. No mercy, no quarter, no half measures. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for centuries. The Devourers were indeed powerful. Their ships could drain energy from stars and consume the matter of entire planets. But they had never faced an enemy that fought like the human protection,